In the early 1980s, if you were looking for a small car, chances are you would be buying one of these, British Leyland's Metro or Ford's Fiesta Mark 1. So in this video, I'm going to give you a little comparison of both of these cars. We'll have a look around both of them around the outside, have a look at the inside, the practicality, and we'll take them both for a drive. Given the popularity of these two cars at the time, I'm certainly not the first person to do a comparison of the two. And in fact, I'm going to be using this autocar from 1981 to give us a little bit of a flavour of what motoring journalists at the time actually thought of both of these cars and see whether I actually agree with them today, 40 odd years later. Let's begin with a little bit of history. The Fiesta was launched in 1977 and was Ford's first proper supermini. It proved to be incredibly popular. People absolutely loved it. They sold like absolute hotcakes. And when the Fiesta was launched, the competition were things like the Renault 5, the Fiat 127 and the Vauxhall Chevette to some extent, although the Chevette is slightly larger. British Leyland, on the other hand, were quite late to the supermini game. Yes, of course, they had the Mini, which was the classic Mini, but that by the 1970s was incredibly outdated, even though it was still incredibly popular. The Metro went through various stages of development with different project codes, but the final car was actually launched in 1980. Mechanically, both of these cars are, on paper, incredibly similar. Both are front-wheel drive. Both of them only have two passenger doors, no rear doors. And of course, both of them have a hatchback tailgate. Under the bonnet, both of them have an engine that was originally designed about 30 odd years before the car was launched. But in both cases, they have been heavily retuned and modified for the new decades. The biggest mechanical difference between the two is the suspension system. The Fiesta runs on McPherson struts at the front and coil springs at the rear, whereas the Metro runs on these hydrogas units, both front and rear. The Fiesta has very clean and crisp 1970s lines. Lots of straight edges, chrome bumpers. The front ends of both cars have taken on quite different treatments. The Fiesta is quite shark-nosed with a very blunt front end, whereas the Metro seems to be more aerodynamically designed. Which of course brings us to the Metro itself. It certainly seems a more curvy design than the Fiesta. We've got the swoops around the door line, we've got the guttering, adding a curve up there, and there's also some subtle curves to the wing panels and to the way that the windscreen fits into the body. All of which point to the fact that the Metro is the newer car that was designed with a bit of wind tunnel assistance and computer-aided design, and the Fiesta is much older and was designed essentially with a pen and paper. If you were looking to buy either of these cars, what you would probably be interested in is the interior, the practicality, and how they drive. So let's start with having a look around the interior. First point to note is that the Fiesta comes with only one key for both the doors, tailgate and ignition. Click it forwards and pull up the little handle. Inside we have a simple vinyl door card with a door pocket and an armrest. We've got some cloth seats which don't have headrests, trimmed in this rather lovely houndstooth fabric. And we have a full-width moulded plastic dashboard into which is cast the instrument cluster and some air vents. Instrumentation is very straightforward. We have got a speedometer on the left-hand side, we've got the gear symbol, we've got some warning lights which are not particularly comprehensive, a fuel gauge and a temperature gauge, and that's about it. On the stalk surrounding the steering wheel, we've got indicators, lights and wipers, which do include an intermittent function on this particular trim level. Underneath the dash, we've got a little cubby hole for storage. We've got some heater controls which are reasonably straightforward. We've got heat, we've got location of heat, a massive ashtray, and a few extra buttons for a fan, warning lights, and heated rear window, rear wiper, and a fog light. In terms of ventilation, we've got these side vents that bring in some air. There's also this central air vent that pops out of the dashboard that blows a bit of air into the cabin, but it isn't directionable, so it just blows it straight into the middle of the cabin rather than towards your face. Let's then turn to the new kid on the block, the Metro. First of all, the Metro has two keys, one for the doors, the tailgate and the fuel cap, and one for the ignition. So we'll take our non-plastic key, put it in the lock, and we turn it backwards on the Metro and open the black metal handle, revealing again a vinyl door card with a generous door pocket, although no armrest on this particular model, it's just a door pull. Inside we've got some more conservatively trimmed seats in this rather lovely blue cloth, which is actually worn incredibly well compared to the cloth on the Fiesta. We also have this, again, moulded plastic dashboard, but this is slightly different to the one on the Fiesta because the instrumentation is in a pod, which would therefore mean that the moulding would be the same left-hand drive or right-hand drive. They would just mount the pod on the other side of the dash. We have a similarity of instrumentation again, so we start with a speedometer on the right-hand side, fuel and temperature on the left-hand side, a gear selector pattern, and some warning lights, although these are a bit more comprehensive than the ones on the Fiesta. We also only have two stalks. Left-hand side is indicators and lights, and the right-hand side is the wipers. We've got a little bank of extra switches here on the right-hand side, which is the minor controls of the car: heated rear window, hazard warning lights, and fog light. In the middle, we've got mainly heater controls, so we've got direction of heat, temperature of the heat, and the fan, which is, again, a two-speed fan, exactly the same as on the Fiesta. In terms of ventilation, the story is slightly different from the Fiesta. We've got some tiny fixed vents at the side and obviously up to the windscreen. Then in the centre, under the dash, we've got these two rather large vents which are very movable. And as we'll see when we take it for a drive, the airflow coming out of these is significantly better. For the passenger, again, we have quite a useful shelf, but we don't have a cubby here at all on this particular model. On higher up models, you would get a glove box. The driving position in the Fiesta is really very comfortable. The pedals are exactly where you would expect them to be, the steering wheel is exactly where you expect it to be, and it's a very nice one to hold. It's a really good size, it's not too hard. It doesn't have cutouts for your fingers, but that doesn't detract from the overall comfort of it. All the minor controls are very easily to hand. We've got our very easy to use stalks over there. Just reach out a little bit for the heater controls, not too bad. The gear stick is exactly to hand and the throw is very small. It's a nice tight little gearbox. The front seats don't have headrests, but then that was entirely normal for a pretty basic car in the early 1980s. The seats themselves are quite nicely shaped. They're reasonably supportive, but I think on a longer journey you would like a little bit more kind of upper back support. They're quite flat. The driving position in the Metro is probably one of its weakest points, and it certainly isn't anywhere near as good as the Fiesta. You can tell that it's a design compromise in order to get the overall dimensions to be quite small. So first of all, the pedals are quite offset to the left compared to the Fiesta because we've got quite a lot of wheel arch intrusion. The elephant in the room with the Metro, of course, is the steering wheel. You cannot get away from the fact that it is a big bus-like steering wheel at a bus-like angle. So the top of the steering wheel is really very far away from you. It doesn't feel that natural, and it makes it feel like you're driving a much older car. In terms of comfort though, I cannot fault these seats. They are really very, very nicely shaped. The foam is quite firm, it keeps me in check, and there's a nice bit of support that comes onto the shoulders. So although we don't have a headrest, the seat itself kind of is higher up onto the body. Another point in the ventilation battle between these two cars is that the Metro doesn't come with front quarter lights, and so the entirety of the front window goes down, meaning that all the air that kind of comes past the A-pillar goes straight to your face, so you get a lot more fresh air coming into the cabin when the window is open. To get into the back of the Fiesta, you've got to tilt the seat forwards by pulling up that lever, and the backrest tilts forwards. And once you are in, there is actually a reasonably decent amount of room available. The fact that you don't have headrests means that the cabin is nice and airy and light. You've got a little bit of an armrest to rest your arm. There's an ashtray, of course, because it's the early 1980s, and no rear seat belts. Priorities. For a small car, there's also a very generous amount of rear legroom. I really am not struggling at all for space here, and the driver's seat is set for my position. I'm about 5'7". The rear seat itself is quite comfortable, it's quite supportive, the backrest is at a nice angle and reaches up to your shoulder blades, so it gives you just that little bit of back support that you need. Access to the rear seats in the Metro is a lot easier than the Fiesta because once you lift this lever, not only does the backrest fall flat, but also the squab slides forwards a little bit on the runners, giving you just that little bit of extra space to get in. And once you are in, what's it like? Well, it's, again, broadly similar to the Fiesta. You've got no headrests, so you've got a nice airy feel to the cabin. But the seat does feel quite different. The backrest is angled much more sharply, and so you're sitting much more upright. It's also a lot lower on the body, so it ends below my shoulder blade, so I don't feel as well supported. And equally, the front of the bench kind of curves up at the front, so although I get a nice bit of thigh support, it sort of digs in a little bit to my thighs and it doesn't feel entirely natural. Your bum sort of is in a little bit of a rut. However, I can't really complain about the legroom. It's perhaps not quite as generous as in the Fiesta, but again, it's really not too bad considering the size of the car overall. You don't get an armrest in the Metro of this trim level, but you can in higher up ones. But of course you still get an ashtray and of course no rear seat belts. As a place to be in the rear, would I prefer to be in the rear of this or in the Fiesta? I guess they're probably much of a muchness. The Fiesta just feels that little bit bigger because you're a tiny bit further away from the rear window with the Fiesta, because the parcel shelf is longer and because the car itself is indeed longer. And the fact that the seat in the Fiesta, I think, is just that little bit bigger, I think feels ultimately is a more comfortable place to be as a passenger for a longer journey. Although, to be honest, I don't think I want to go on a particularly long journey in either of these cars without proper rear seat belts. To get into the luggage compartment of the Fiesta, you do need the key, which enters into the lock, and you twist it, and then it rises up on its two gas struts, lifting up the parcel shelf with it. The boot is relatively long, stretching to the back of the back seats there. It's generally trimmed with some plastic on the sides and wood on the floor. But my main criticism of the Fiesta boot is that it's very shallow, so you can't even do something like put this fairly small suitcase on its side. It would have to go on its flat, because otherwise the parcel shelf would foul on it. However, you do get this little storage cubby under the floor. Being one of the first cars in the hatchback revolution, I think we ought to tip the rear seats down just to get the maximum practicality out of this car. So we unhook the parcel shelf, which is quite creaky, pull on these plastic tabs there, and the whole seat folds forward flat, and the parcel shelf just sort of forms part of the load area. And as you can see, with the seats folded flat, there is plenty of space. There's a nice load area. The load lip is reasonably low. There's only a few centimetres there that you have to lift over, and turns the Fiesta into a pretty practical little estate car. Getting into the boot of the Metro again involves using the key into the lock, giving it a turn, and up pops the tailgate, again on its dual gas struts, lifting up a parcel shelf. The boot itself offers a different set of compromises to the Fiesta. As you can see, it is significantly deeper, which means that my suitcase now has plenty of space to be set upright. The flip side of that is that you have this incredibly deep load lip going down probably about 30 odd centimetres. The inside of the boot is again trimmed with a bit of carpet over the wheel arches and some plastic, and the floor has got this kind of rubberised plastic material. Let's play hatchback in the Metro and get the seats folded down. So we unhook the parcel shelf in almost exactly the same way as in the Fiesta. And then we need to reach underneath this time and push on these two levers, ideally simultaneously, which tips the seat backrest forwards. The parcel shelf on the Metro has a little clip so that it stays in place on the backrest, and then the entire seat assembly tips forwards one more time. And that reveals a pretty deep and flat load area, although there is this very large load lip to lift things over to get them into the car. And you've also got the seat itself taking up quite a decent chunk of the length. So I think both of these cars exhibit their hatchback tendencies in slightly different ways, and it really just depends on how you think you'll be living your life as to which one you'd want to choose in terms of luggage carrying capacity. Personally, although it is a shorter load space, I actually much prefer the Metro's boot. It's much more flexible. You can, because of the extra depth, get so much more stuff into it under the parcel shelf and out of the way than you can in the Fiesta's very shallow one. Right, I think we've covered all the practicality points. Let's get both of these cars out on the road and see how they compare to drive, starting with the Fiesta. Well, the first impression of the Fiesta when you drive it is that it is such a lively car. But then this is the bigger engine, the 1.1. The base cars would come with a 950cc engine, which would be slightly more comparable to the one in the Metro. This is 53 horsepower. The Metro with its 1 litre engine is 46. They're not that far apart. Pulling out of junctions like that one is absolutely no problem in the Fiesta. It just flies out. The clutch is quite snatchy, so you do have to kind of teach your left leg to be just that little more gentle than you want to be, because you really can snatch that clutch and make the car quite jerky. It's very hard to drive this car smoothly, to be honest. And around town here, kind of cruising at 30 miles an hour in 4th gear, is actually a pretty pleasant place to be. The only negative point to it around town is that the ventilation really is quite poor. For some reason, Autocar in their review and comparison with the Metro 1981 concluded that the Fiesta had the better ventilation. But they did their test in February, so it was cold, so it may well be that the Fiesta has a better heater, but the Metro most definitely has much nicer airflow to the face. This has like nothing. I don't have the fan on, there's nothing coming in hardly at all. And even with the fan, you get noise, and there's some air, but it's here by my shoulder, not to my face. I'll turn that off, otherwise you won't be able to hear me. And when you open the window, even fully, because of this quarter light, the air goes past my face and heads off to the back of the car instead of towards me as the driver. The driving position is really nice. The steering wheel feels good in your hand. You feel like you're in a really commanding driving position. You sit quite high up. You've got nice visibility out of the rear view mirror. You've got nice visibility over your shoulder through the big low glass area. The ride is quite firm, but it is very compliant. So although I can feel kind of all the bumps in the road, I kind of know the car's in control of it and isn't going to jolt me too much. It does mean that when you're on a country road and you're going off at speed, you do have quite a lot of confidence to take it into corners because you know that it'll handle that corner really well. And also with the 1.1 engine, you've got some power to leave that corner and escape when you need to. The gear change is really nice and slick. It's really easy to snick it about into all the gears. It sort of glides through, and there is a nice little bit of springing action that takes you from second across the box to third. Accelerating away from that roundabout, we really do have a bit of power here. Third still to 50 and into fourth, and we have really flown away from that roundabout. The performance of this car is really excellent. It really is a bit of a flyer. However, now we're at speed, we're doing 50. I could go up to 60. Let's go up to 60 quickly before the speed limit changes. There we go, 60 miles an hour. It is quite frantic in here. The engine is kind of screaming its nuts off. The exhaust is very loud, and that kind of very classic hollow sound that the Mark 1 Fiesta has. It's a wonderful thing in terms of nostalgia, but in terms of actually living with it every day, it can get quite drony and quite draining, and also very tiring on a longer journey. You really can thrash the Fiesta Mark 1. It really loves it. It's quite leery. It's a little bit of a hooligan, and it's really fun to drive. But I think in a small car that you want to putter around the city in, and maybe pop on a longer journey very occasionally in, you maybe don't want something that's quite so frantic. And so immediately the Metro feels like a very different beast to drive from the Fiesta. It is much less responsive than the Fiesta, particularly from sort of a standing start if you're pulling out of a junction. The exhaust note is much quieter, but the engine note is again ever present, but it's different. It's kind of a bit higher, the engine note in the Metro. It's unrefined in the same way as the Fiesta, but the particular note of it is a kind of higher pitched unrefinedness, if that makes any sense to anybody. We've also got a chance for you to listen to the drop gears as we get out of this. So pulling out of that junction, you can really feel that first gear gets very breathless after a very short amount of time, and that's because it's the drop gears and that straight cut first in the Metro's gearbox in sump, which makes it a very different drive around town than the Fiesta. The gearbox just isn't as lovely to use. The change is very accurate. You know exactly what gear you're in. There's no chance of getting it wrong in any way. But there's no springing assistance across the box, and the gears themselves, until you get to sort of third and fourth, they're very, very breathless, and it runs out of steam in the gear pretty quickly. I'm now driving in town at 30 miles an hour in fourth gear, and it feels very refined and pleasant. It's perfectly sort of ticking away. We haven't got too much noise going on, and we do have a nice bit of airflow coming from these little vents in the middle straight to my face, just so I feel a little bit more kind of cooled and refreshed than I do in the Fiesta. Let's open her up on the country road. pickup from 30 in third is really not too bad. We're now doing sort of 45 miles an hour. We'll get up to 50 in a moment. We may get up to 60 one day. Okay, now we're doing nearly 60. And it bombs along, but there's a difference here. It's bombing along, the engine is kind of noisy, it's there, but it doesn't seem to be grumbling as much as the Fiesta's engine. It seems to be ticking along quite happily, and you feel like you could do 60 miles an hour all day long in the Metro, and it would just love it. It's also much more relaxing because you know the car is a little bit more at ease. So you're more at ease, the exhaust isn't blaring away, and you've got nice ventilation to your face, and when you open the window, the wind actually comes to you rather than behind you. So I think for a longer journey driving experience, I would definitely pick the Metro just for that extra comfort, even though it is that little bit slower kind of on pickup. There is kind of a little bit more squeaks and rattles in the Metro. I know British Leyland worked really hard to try and make it a really modern car, but this dashboard doesn't half creak in a way that the Fiesta really doesn't, which kind of reduces that kind of aura of quality a little bit, which is a shame. The suspension on the Metro is of course hydrogas, so it's very different to the Fiesta, and I have to admit that on a country road or a big old motorway or dual carriageway, it really does glide along beautifully in a way that the Fiesta doesn't. The Fiesta is much more jittery and hard. But when you end up on really uneven road surfaces, like, you know, a dug up city road that's been patched up so many times, the Metro loses its composure. It becomes very kind of all the wheels kind of doing a different thing, and it really, the jolts kind of come straight through the cabin in a way that it doesn't in the Fiesta. It's almost as if the hydrogas system can't quite cope with it, and so you're very much more aware of rougher road surfaces in this than you are in the Fiesta. The driving position is very, very different, and I do feel like I am driving something a bit more akin to an antique or a pensioner. This Bakelite rimmed steering wheel that is canted at this angle that's more like a van or a lorry really does make you feel like you're driving something from a completely different era. Couple that with that distinctive and wonderfully beautiful noise of the drop gears, you get that kind of classic motoring vibe coming through in this in a way that you don't in the Fiesta. It's really strange. But in terms of a legacy, I feel that the Mark 1 Fiesta has a much wider profile. For example, when I go out driving in the Fiesta, I get waves, I get flashes, I get people coming to talk to me at petrol stations, and the Metro, people don't quite do that. I sometimes do get comments of, you know, oh, my grandmother had one of those, but usually a lot of the comments are a bit derisory about the Metro. Then they weren't very good, and gosh, you know, it was a shame that mine rusted so badly. And that's a real shame for the Metro. So, do I have a conclusion for you? Is one of these cars better than the other? Well, Autocar in their review weren't particularly conclusive. They said that they were basically very similar to each other, and I think I would agree with that. They have certain characteristics and certain traits that make one slightly better than the other in certain ways. So for example, the Metro with its deeper boot means that you can get luggage in it much more easily, I think. But then the Fiesta with its longer load bay and flatter load area when you have the seats folded down is a much more practical sort of small estate car. Driving both cars also reveals slightly different ways of doing the same thing. The Fiesta is zesty and raucous. The Metro is loud and a little bit pedestrian with that gearbox. But ultimately, as Autocar say, both of them are nippy, both of them are agile, both of them bring a smile to your face when you're driving them. And really, the choice between the two of them must come down to, at the time, what you felt was most important. Did you feel like you preferred to be able to do a longer, quieter journey with better ventilation? Do you feel like you want to have a slightly bigger interior? Do you feel like you want to have slightly more supportive seats? Do you feel like you want to have a better driving position? It really is much of a muchness between them in a lot of ways. They both have their compromises. But in 2023, how do they stack up as classics? And perhaps that's where I want to judge them. The Fiesta gets a lot of waves, it gets a huge amount of people excited and interested, and in a lot of ways this is the much more desirable classic. It's also worth more money. For me, it comes down to this. The Metro, I believe, is a happy car. The Fiesta is just that touch more aggressive and industrial in a way that doesn't quite gel with the way that I work with the world. The Metro is an underdog. And for that reason, this is the one that I will be plumping for today. But what about you? If it was the early 80s, would you choose the Fiesta or would your choice be the Metro? And would your answer be different if you're buying them now as a classic? Let me know in the comments below, I'll be really interested to hear. Well, there we are. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. There is a like button that you can press if you've done so, and I would be really grateful if you click the subscribe button if you'd like to see some more content. I've got more stuff coming up soon. See you in the next video. Bye.